Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call to order tonight's meeting of the City of Santa Rosa Planning Commission and ask for roll call, please.
Let the record reflect that all commissioners are present. Let the record reflect that all commissioners are present.
Okay. Next, I'm going to move to the approval of our minutes. The first, we're going to break these up. The first is the June 22nd meeting. Any comments or corrections to those minutes? And those will stand. And because I was not at the June 15th joint meeting with Design Review, I'm going to pass that chore off to Vice Chair Edmondson.
And review of the June 15th joint meeting. Those of us who attended that meeting, any corrections or comments? Seeing none, those will stand as printed.
Okay, thanks for that. Next, we're going to move on to public comments, which is a time for any member of the public to come down and address the commission on matters of interest to the commission that are not listed tonight as a public hearing. I'm going to go ahead and open public comments. You don't have to have filled out a card if you wish to speak. And if you'd like to come down, move to a microphone. Okay. And these are comments for things that are not listed as a public hearing tonight. I'm going to give her one more minute to make sure. If you're here on the Farmers Lane matter, that is listed as a public hearing, so you'll have an opportunity to speak. So I'm not seeing anyone come down for public comments. I'm going to go ahead and close that. And next, we have the administration of oath of office for our new planning commissioner, Julian Peterson. And Mike Maloney will be doing that oath.
I, Julian Peterson, do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties
upon which I am about to enter.
upon which I am about to enter.
So now we're going to move on to Planning Commissioner's report, and I want to begin by welcoming new Commissioner Peterson and ask if there's anything you'd like to say.
Just a brief comment. I want to thank you all for the hard work that's gone into getting me up to speed, both staff and commissioners, and I look forward to doing the work.
Great. Well, welcome again. Any other Planning Commissioner's report? Commissioner Duggan.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that for personal reasons, I need to leave by 6:30. So if in any event we're not done with our business, I'm just going to step out at that time. So not to worry.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Great. Next, we'll move on to department reports.
All right, I'd like to give an update on two council priorities and show you where you can find even more details on these two areas. So first is our cannabis website. So we have updated our City of Santa Rosa website, but it's an ongoing process, and as we have news to relate, we're updating these specific project pages. So we have been updating the cannabis policy page, and as many of you know, the comprehensive policy is The draft is up and available for public comment, so that can be found here. You can also, this is set up for easy user reference. So on the left-hand side, you have links to what the policy process is. If you have questions about personal cannabis cultivation, policy development, let's see if we can click on that. So for example, for our residents, they have questions about personal cannabis cultivation, you can quickly get to your answers. So this is set up to basically self-help, whether you're an applicant, a resident, you're from out of the area, and you're curious about what's going on with Santa Rosa's policies. It's all right here, Medical Cannabis Policy Subcommittee meetings, and all the work that we've done to date, all the packet information. So it's a wealth of information, but it's a one-stop shop, and that's kind of the approach that our department's been taking with a lot of our projects in relationship to council policies. Just a shout out for an upcoming event related to cannabis policy on Monday night in this chambers, July 17th from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. We will have a public workshop. The draft ordinance will be presented, but mostly that workshop is entailed to listen to the community if they have questions, comments. It's just an opportunity to do that. Staff also is available to reach out to other groups, resident groups, business associations, school districts, and we are reaching out to all of them. But if folks are interested in having staff present or connect them with these resources, we're happy to do that. The idea for moving forward on the cannabis policy is that we'll look to July for outreach. We'll kind of consolidate what we've heard in the first month of this outreach process, and then return back to the Council Policy Subcommittee, report back to them, and see if what we want to do at that point, if we want to make refinements to the ordinance, or whether we're ready to move on to the next step, which is the Planning Commission in a public hearing format. So that's cannabis. And there's quick links that we set up. So for cannabis, all you have to know is that word. And if you can click on srcity.org/cannabis, this is the site that you get to. Now moving on to housing. So the other council policy is housing for all. Let's see if this works. So for Housing for All, what you need to know is srcity.org/housing action plan, or even HAP. So again, quick links so people can access this information freely. It's live, it's updated as often as it needs to be. So this is going to be quite interesting for the Planning Commission, because many of these housing action plan initiatives will come before the Planning Commission for review. So this is your first glimpse at where all these initiatives are in the process, and you can follow them much prior to them coming before you in a public hearing format. So, for example, questions in terms of the actual plan itself, you can click on those links. Here's a link on Housing Action Plan Element Status Updates. So this is brand new as of today. You have a lot of different resources here. We have a master diagram of what projects are active right now, what's next phase, and what we haven't started yet. Has timelines, so you can see how they correlate and relate, and also how they report back and link back to that housing action plan. On the left side, these are our active housing initiatives. Quite a few. I think I told somebody today 5. There's more than 5 there. And you can click on any of them and see where they're at in the process and what they entail. So for permit streamlining, there's a summary of what the scope is, what the process is, and essentially contact and the timeline. Next step for this is to have a master timeline schedule, so you can kind of map these as they go along on one table, and so we're still working on that. What else did I want to say about this page? A recurring question that the commission has had has been on how are we doing towards our metric targets for Housing Action Plan. We are still developing that data, but I'll show you what we have. Let's see, it is in. So again, this is the Housing Action Plan main page. On the left-hand side, you'll see housing activity/construction, reports and updates. So you can click on that. So we have sort of three elements here. We have 2017 numbers. So this is as of June 1st, 2017. We intend to do quarterly report outs. This is focused on 2017 building permits. So permits that are active right now, going through building permit review or are in some phase of construction or initiation. So that's what these numbers are. We don't have these numbers broken down by income categories. That's something we'll have to look at to do. This is a second element to this metric, and this is, you've seen this before, this is the year-end 2016 housing report, again showing sort of what's in planning and entitlement versus the building permit stage versus what's under construction or ready for construction. And then lastly, what we do have for 2015 and 2016 in terms of the metrics related to income categories is in this report that you have received earlier. Again, another end of the year report. That was that annual review that involved a joint session with the City Council. Well, we presented this through correspondence, but this report was presented to both Council and Commission. And I believe it's on page 5. Is a table that shows you how are we doing meeting our targets that are not just our regional needs, but consistent with our housing action plan in terms of all these income categories. So you see the 2015 numbers, 2016 total issued combined, and what our remaining need is. We have quite a bit of need, but we'll be able to track this as we move along. And again, we'll be updating this with our 2017 numbers as they come along. So I just want to give you a heads up on these websites because this is accessible to everyone, and we're trying to be transparent with all the information that we have, but not just be transparent, be accessible so people can get to this information quickly, easily, in ways that they understand. So that's the update that I have for you. I think you're back. Is this hers? Okay.
So we're done with the department reports. Okay. Okay, great. Next is statements of abstention by commissioners. Any abstentions tonight? That's good. Okay. So with that, we're going to move on to our first and only public hearing tonight, which is for the Farmer Lane Senior Housing rezoning density bonus and tentative map. It is an ex parte disclosure. And Commissioner Weeks, anything to disclose?
Nothing. I did visit the site and spoke to the developer rep, but nothing new to disclose.
Okay. Commissioner Groningen.
I visited the site a couple of occasions, met with the developer's representative a number of weeks ago now, and took a particular look at various times during the day the conditions on Gilbert Avenue.
Okay. Anything new to report?
Nothing new.
Okay, great.
I also visited the site and met with the developer's representative and have nothing further or new to disclose.
Okay. Commissioner Duggan?
I visited the site and met with the developer's representative and have nothing else to disclose.
Commissioner Rumble?
I visited the site and met with the developer's representative. Nothing more to disclose.
And Commissioner Peterson?
I visited the site and met with the developer's representative, and I have nothing new to disclose.
Okay, great. I also visited the site. I met with the developer's consultant. I also was on the Waterways Committee and saw this project when it came before the Waterways Committee, and I have nothing new to report. And with that, Susie Murray is staff, and we'll give our staff presentation.
Again, it's Farmers Lane Senior Housing before you this afternoon. The project, it's a nice opportunity, good segue to Claire's report, that this proposes 5 affordable units for moderate level income owners. It gets us 21 units closer to our 5,000 unit goal by 2022, which is 0.82% of the market rate units, and then 5 more units closer, which is 0.63% of the moderate level income units. The Farmers Lane project proposes to construct a 26-unit condominium complex. It includes a rezoning that will designate these units for senior housing. It designates 5 units for moderate income owners, and it includes 4 applications. Like I said, the rezoning, which will rezone it not to a new district, but into a combining district for senior housing, which I'll discuss a little bit more in a few minutes. The density bonus, which the project qualifies for an 18% density, an 18% density increase. I keep getting my numbers flip-flopped here. And a tentative map for a 26-unit condominium airspace subdivision and a design review board. The first 3 of those entitlements are before the Planning Commission tonight. The design review board will review the design review. Here's an aerial view of the site, kind of closer up, and it shows that there are several significant trees on the site. It's also a challenging shape, which we'll talk about a little bit further as well. As we pull back a little bit, you can see that it's surrounded to the west by single-family residential, to the north by commercial centers, to the east by the big field, a school, a church, and to the south by commercial uses. This is a site plan, and as you can see, I tried to keep all of the graphics in the same orientation for you. The site will take access, or the project will take access off Farmers Lane at the most southern point on Farmers Lane. The primary 4-story structure is on the northern end of the site, adjacent to the creek, and the second structure, which is a 2-story structure, is on the south end of the site. Back in 2008, the site had a general plan amendment and rezoning, changing it to medium-density residential and the R318 residential zoning district, which is consistent with that. And it's allowed to develop at a rate of 8 to 18 units per acre. In 2015, we saw this project for the first time at a concept design review meeting. And then in 2016, the same concept was reviewed by city staff. Did I say 2018? I meant 2015. So in 2016, we introduced the concept to the neighbors, and later that month, actually, we received the project applications. Here's a graphic of the general plan diagram for the area surrounding it, and as you can see, to the west, it's low-density residential, and then to the south, all along that corridor along Farmers Lane, is medium-density residential. To the east, public institutional, and to the north, it's retail and business services, and that striped area up across Farmers Lane also allows for medium-density residential housing. The star marks the site, just for clarification. This project meets several or implements several goals of the general plan, several policies and goals. Most importantly, it provides housing, but it doesn't stop there. It adds affordable housing, and it also adds housing that is designated for seniors. The site has several mature trees on it, and there was attention given to that, and several of those trees preserved, most of those trees preserved. And it will also provide us with a walking path with public access along the creek. Site zoning is, like I said, R113. I went ahead and added this graphic of the general plan because it lines up perfectly. All the zoning in the area is consistent with the general plan. Again, the project includes a rezoning, and the rezoning, the Planning Commission is being asked to make a recommendation to the City Council, and the City Council will be the final review authority on that. Not changing the zoning, the base zoning district, we're simply adding it into the senior housing combining district. By doing so, that site will be required, the total units, 80% of the total units will be required to be occupied by at least one person 55 years or older. The site will also be eligible for a reduced parking requirement. The project also includes a density bonus. The Planning Commission, again, will make a recommendation to the City Council, and the City Council will take final action on the density bonus. We're consistent with the state's density bonus regulations, qualifies for a 18% density bonus, I missed a word there, because it designates 23% of the gross allowable density for moderate income occupants. It also qualifies for 2 development-related concessions. So I threw up the math here just because sometimes there's question about that. The maximum allowable density for this property is 22 units for the purposes of calculating the density bonus. 5 of those units, or 23%, are designated for people making 120% of the median area income or moderate income. And then, again, there's 5 units that will be part of that density increase. The project qualifies for 2 concessions. The first one is parking, but I'd like to point out that the project actually meets the requirements of the parking regulations in the zoning code. The zoning code has provisions that allows the review authority to increase the number of parking spaces. So even though they meet those zoning code requirements, the applicant has requested that parking be taken as one of the concessions, which basically relieves you of being able to increase the parking requirement. The building height, the maximum allowable height is 45 feet for that site. The building was originally designed at 45 feet, but when they went to the Concept Design Review Board, when the applicant went to the board, they had some rooftop equipment that the board recommended be screened. So they added an additional screen on the rooftop to shield that equipment, and that's where the additional 2 feet came in. So their concession is really it's for 2 feet above the allowable height. Here's some building elevations. This is what the building will look like on Farmers Lane. And then the 2-story building that I think you'll pretty much be able to see that if you're on the property. And this is what those elevations look like. The project has been found in compliance with the Environmental Quality Act, California Environmental Quality Act. It's consistent with the general plan. It was considered in the review of the general plan EIR, and it also qualifies for a categorical exemption as infill development. So we've had quite a few public comments during the neighborhood meeting, as well as several email comments received since, of which there were some late correspondence, and I hope you all had an opportunity to review those. The very first two here, well, the density is a concern. They've got the density bonus. The density, they meet the density requirements of the general plan, then of course with the density bonus go above that. Parking and building height, we've already talked about. Those are being taken as concessions. There was concern about the placement of the trash enclosure, which is at the southwest corner of the 4-story structure. And the trash enclosure, I learned actually this morning, will be designed with as a fully enclosed structure. It'll be ventilated, so it'll control any odors, what have you. We can't control the sound of the garbage trucks, and the garbage trucks have to come off Farmers Lane in order to empty it. So there's limitations as to where that can be placed. But they have upgraded the design of the enclosure to minimize impacts to neighbors and residents of this facility. Property values comes up on a pretty regular basis when, I think, usually when I'm presenting residential new projects. And it's something that we don't ask for an analysis on it. That is not something that is within yours or my purview. Not to say we don't care, but we've talked about trees. And then there's one outstanding issue, and that is the fence height that's along the property line separating this project from the single-family residential homes to the west. And during the concept design review meeting, and we've heard since, there was a proposal for a 6-foot fence, just basically a standard fence. And the neighbors asked for an 8-foot fence. The 8-foot fence is a use, and that can be added as a condition of approval if the Planning Commission would like to do that today. The design of that fence will transfer over to the Design Review Board and will be, depending on your action, will be on those plans. Or, yeah, it will show however you would like it to show. So there are no unresolved issues. Depending on your action tonight, the next steps include taking to the City Council the rezoning and the density bonus, and the Design Review Board will, of course, see the design review. The design review, the zoning code prohibits us from granting final design review until all land use entitlements are in place, and so that will be the last action. And with that, it is recommended by the Planning and Economic Development Department that the Planning Commission adopt 3 resolutions for this Farmers Lane Senior Housing Project. The first, recommending that the council rezone the site to into the senior housing combining district. Recommend that the council approve a density bonus, allowing an 18% density increase and 2 development-related concessions, and approve a tentative map for 26 condominium units. That concludes my presentation. I know that the applicant would also like to make a presentation, so if you've got questions for me, or I can bring them up.
Okay. Commissioners, I'm going to ask that since we've already submitted a number of fairly technical questions, I'm going to ask that we hold the rest of our questions even after the applicants give their presentation, to give the public an opportunity to speak so we can collect all of the questions at once and we don't have experts jumping up and down, if you're all right with that. So we may have questions, but later. Okay. And ready for the applicant.
Thank you, Chair Cisco, Commissioners. I'm Steve Sharp, today representing Barbara Hayes, the applicant and property owner. Welcome, new Commissioners Peterson and Commissioner Weeks. Today, we're representing the Farmers Lane project. With me are, in the audience, sitting mostly over here, are the property owner, Barbara Hayes, the architect, Paul Gilger, the landscape architect, Rachel McQueen, traffic engineer, Steve Weinberger, the civil engineer, Kevin Doble, noise consultant, Fred Swinth, cultural and historic resource consultants, Bill and Kathy Rue, here to answer any of your questions. This request represents an opportunity to provide medium-density housing on a site which is currently vacant, probably most likely the last vacant lot on property on Farmers Lane. It's highly accessible. It's near shopping areas, including 4th Street and Montgomery Village. It's near public transportation. The project, as your staff recommends, is consistent with the general plan, consistent with zoning, and also consistent with Council and Planning Commission priorities for providing additional housing. Development of the site will also preserve and enhance open space along the creek and provide development of a pedestrian and bike path along within the riparian setback area. In addition, the project has several benefits. It's for sale senior housing, a unique niche, I think, in Santa Rosa and certainly Sonoma County. It's got 5 affordable units for moderate income housing. It's high quality architecture and finishes. And much of the site's going to remain open due to the required creek setbacks. The project has been reviewed by your design review committee in concept, the Waterways Advisory Committee. We held a neighborhood meeting. And the project has tried to incorporate many of the comments and recommendations from these meetings. Our project team has reviewed the staff report, the presentation, find it inclusive, accurate. We concur with the analysis, the findings, the recommendations, and the conditions. I would like to introduce Paul Gilder, the project architect, who's going to go through some of the design issues, design comments, or design pieces, and then Rachel's going to come up and talk about landscape architecture. Part of this is going to be concentrated on the neighborhood compatibility issues. Paul.
Hi, everybody. Paul Gilger with Hedgepeth Architects here in Santa Rosa. It's rare that I get to present what I call real high-quality architecture. So often the case, we have projects that we really have to value engineer to make them work, and we're very fortunate to have a developer who's really willing to ramp it up. And you can see from the image up there that we have an opportunity here with this site. It's a very unique site. It was a difficult site to work on. There's a lot of constraints with the setback along the creek, access into the site, and the shape of the site. And as you know, density, Santa Rosa density is based on gross, not on net. So in order to make the density work, it required us to go with the 4-story building to get the density to what the general plan required, even without the density bonus. So I think my first time to work this, let's see here. There we go. So as I was saying, the site plan, the setback along the creek actually goes right up against the back side of the building to the north. The city did request that we keep our access lane where we have it. They want it as far away from the intersection of 4th Street as possible. And then I've just included some various images showing the turrets on the corner of the building. We're really trying to make the building friendly, looking out onto the street. And the architecture is architecture from between the wars, I call it, between World War I and World War II. There's a lot of Bernard Maybeck influence in the architecture with the wood brackets. A lot of Northern California vernacular. The developer wanted to have a very comfortable kind of architecture that wasn't alienating to the possible clientele that would buy the units in the project. The parking garage occupies most of the first floor. We've kept a real honesty because the parking garage is a masonry parking garage. Then we're using masonry to express that element on the first floor to help break up the height of the building. The back side of the building along the creek, there has been some discussion about the walk along the creek. This is a fairly early rendering that you see on the bottom here when the creek walk was somewhat meandering. You'll see various creek iterations that are still being discussed. The 2-story building in the back, because it is so surrounded by the homes, it is 2 units, and we put 1 unit on top of the other and have made every attempt to make this 2-unit building look like a custom home in the back. This is the back side. The lower image is the back side from the south, and the upper image is the terrace side facing the homes along to the west. We've also provided, there's 2 shadow studies here. The first shadow study is a summer solstice. So from left to right is 9 a.m., then noon, and then 3 p.m. The difference from the upper to the upper 3 are without the trees, and the lower 3 are with the trees. I will come back to this. I just want to explain. Then the next page is the winter solstice. Again, the same thing. The upper is without the trees, and the winter is with the trees. So backing up to the summer solstice, you can see that there's very little shadowing of the building itself, certainly not on any other building. And actually, if you go to the winter solstice, it's the same thing. Because of the angle of this building, the angle of the site, and if you look at the upper left-hand corner image, that's 9 o'clock in the morning. In the winter, you can see that the shadow of the building is cast out over the creek and not over the houses to the west. So that ends my part of it, the project. And of course, I'll take questions when you ask questions. I'm going to turn it over to Quadriga, and they will explain their pages that they've got here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rachel McQueen. I'm from Quadriga Landscape Architecture in Santa Rosa. So I'll just walk you through, let's see, here we go. So starting along the west side, I know Susie talked a little bit about the fence along here that we're requesting possibly an 8-foot height. In addition to that, we have some screening shrubs. All of these are evergreen. Many of them are native or Mediterranean plants and pretty dense and tall, so that we're kind of buffering that fence with tall and dense shrubs as well to keep that privacy. So the trees that, we're showing this canopy of the neighboring tree on the neighbor's property, just to kind of show, we're trying to maintain as much of that, the valley oaks and the native landscape as we can. So in some of the, I know there was some tree removal, and we can see, if you see the dashed line around and the trees with the X's in them, those are all of our removed trees. And our existing that we're trying to maintain are all here in this sort of lighter shade. So we're really trying to, we tried to maximize what we could on this site. We were pretty constrained in some areas, but we are replacing the trees that we removed with valley oaks and trying to keep that, you know, the heritage oak look of this site. And can I go to the next? There we go. So then moving around the site, we have bike parking, you know, we're standard 2 spaces for this project. And then here's that, you know, sort of walkway that's for a future class 2 bike lane. And we're still, again, trying to feather back into this, the Santa Rosa Creek on this side, and just seamlessly transition between the planting on the building side and back into the river. That's pretty much all I have.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
I think that's it. That's it for us.
Okay, great. And again, we'll probably have many questions for you, but I'm going to have the commission hold the questions till after we have our public hearing, and you'll be asked to come up to respond to the public also. Okay. Okay. So this is a public hearing tonight, and I have one card on the item. You don't have to have filled out a card. It's just helpful for me. I'll call names. I will give my usual speech that I'm a strict timekeeper. You'll be given 3 minutes. If you'll keep an eye on the little light bar there, it'll begin with green. As you get closer to the 3-minute stopping time, it'll go to yellow, and then when it's red, just please suspend your comments. And so with that, I don't know that it'll be an issue tonight, but I just want to call attention to the fact that we do have an overhead. If you have photographs that you want to display, you can use the overhead. If you have some sort of electronic thumb drive, we don't really have the capacity for you to interrupt what we have set up here and to manage to show us what you have electronically. So if you'd keep it to paper only, if you have something to show us, that would be great. Also want to assure the neighbors here, one of your neighbors, Rhonda Roman, came and spoke because she could not be here tonight. She spoke under a public comment a couple of sessions ago. I want to assure you I do have her comments and concerns in front of me, and I'll make sure that those are addressed also if they aren't matched up by someone else here. Okay. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing, and the one card I have is for Jeff Qualls. If you'll come down or up to a microphone and restate your name for the record, that would be helpful.
Hi, my name is Jeff Qualls. I'm a resident of Gilbert Drive. I wanted to thank you guys for hearing from me today. The biggest thing about this property is that the residents of Gilbert want this property developed. It's just a matter of at what cost to current living, existing, and what we deal with already on the lane. You know, you already know that you rezoned it one time, 2008, from low density to medium density. Now we're asking one more time for more density, and that's a major concern. You know, the biggest concerns for us is that for especially my property, because I am on that northwest corner house, is the summer solstice sun. So I will be shaded until probably noon. We are basically, that's, you know, we're avid vegetable gardeners, that kind of thing, and that's my garden bed is that corner. We're looking at thousands of dollars for me to move that property somewhere else in my yard so I actually can grow basically anything in the summertime. The biggest one after that would be parking. 29 spaces for 29 units. As you know, there is public access through my property that is going to connect to that creek line, and that is where people are going to park. They're going to pull into Gilbert Lane, and that's the only option they're going to have. There is no parking on Farmers Lane, as you know, and if 2 parking spaces are filled, where are they going to go? They're not going to go anywhere but drive around the corner, walk right through the property, and park in front of all of our homes, which we already face from the commercial zone at the end at this point. So that's a huge part of it. You know, just being able to be out in our front yards is going to be very difficult. So next would be just the overall loss of privacy. 4-story building looking into my residence, basically. Have 2 young daughters that their rooms are facing directly into that property. So we're going to have total loss of privacy there. Currently we have a, you know, obviously a very private area. There is note of the fence height. We currently have an 8-foot fence. We would need to at least have that for sure. They did enclose the trash can. That is another concern. The placement is more of an issue than the enclosing of it. Just the overall noise and, you know, at all times basically going to a trash can, which people do. So basically, you know, this committee, I really appreciate everybody here. We have been left out of the process as a residence altogether. This was supposed to happen a month and a half ago. It was canceled. Never received formal notice of a change except for seeing a sign on Farmers Lane. So that's a big thing for me. You know, that I have to go to look at a sign to see when I have to be here. So I would hope that you would recommend to the Planning Commission that they need to basically do a better job of communicating to the residents, because there has been 0 communication to my house from anyone in the city, other than the July 2016 meeting, which we attended. So I would hope that that would be something we could, definitely improve upon. So I don't have anything else. So
Great,
thank you very much.
You did it right in the nick of time. We failed to turn on the bar, but I was timing you, so you did
Okay.
great. Thank
All right.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else wishing to speak on this item? Come on down. And if you'd state your name, please.
My name is Hale Darby, and I live at 220 Gilbert Drive. I'm about 5 or 6 houses down from the site on the right-hand side. When we talk about parking, I'm not sure that if you come to our street on a day that Dr. Bernstein, who has an office on the corner of Montgomery Drive and Farmers Lane, has all his people parking. Now, how do I say this? He has a schedule that he gives his people, and he has about 40 cars parking on our street about 3 days a week. 10 years ago, I came to the Planning Commission and I said, he wants to expand his business, and the Planning Commission said, but he has enough cars for his workers to park. If you drive by, if you go out between 8:15 and 9:15, when Dr. Bernstein's workers come to our street and park on our street and take off, as I said, 3/4 of the spaces on the street, his parking lot is empty because all his workers are on our street. I think they go to other streets some days, and there is a schedule. I know that he has a schedule, but you can't imagine what it's like you think you're going to live in a nice, quiet neighborhood, and suddenly you're really living in, like, I don't know, next to a grocery store or something. You've got a grocery store parking lot on your street. So that's my concern. We really don't have a lot of extra parking places. And that's what I'm concerned about. That's what we're all concerned about. Sometimes when you come, it looks perfect. But many times when you come, Dr. Bernstein's workers are there from 8:15 to 5 o'clock. And how are we going to accommodate, all these other people coming from the new building at the top end of the street? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak on this item? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone else rise, so I'm going to go ahead and close our public hearing and ask the applicant to come back up and address some of the concerns that you heard here. I'll have staff come back up too. I've got them written down. If you didn't read, I'll help you.
I think the ones I've read, there are several people involved.
Okay.
So we may have to ask other people to come up as well.
Okay, sure. Well, I think let's start with shading. Do you have your shading expert here, Gilbert? Okay, great.
I throw a lot of shade. Yeah, I'll go back to that graphic. Yeah, we did it specifically in trying to respond to the neighbors' concerns. That's why these studies were done. So you can see this is the summer solstice, and if you look at the top where the building is without the trees, you can see that at 9 o'clock in the morning, the building does shadow the gentleman's backyard a little bit. It's that upper left corner. That's at 9. Certainly by 10, it would be clear of the backyard. And then from what I understand from his comment, he was concerned was the summer during the growing season. So that would be the graphic that you want to look at there. And this comes right off of the computer modeling for summer solstice for Santa Rosa area. And then as far as the trash, one of the reasons that we do want to enclose the trash enclosure, even though we can't control the sound of the trash truck, we are aware that when people go to the trash bins and put something in the trash bin, that can make noise. So the trash enclosure is actually a very large room. They go through a door into a room, the door goes shut, and then from there they can dump things into the trash bin. So they're actually in an enclosed room with the door shut to help control that sound of stuff going into a metal bin. So that would be my there.
Okay.
Chairman Cisco, is there any other architectural questions that you see?
I think you could probably help us with the loss of privacy, how you developed
we did
outdoor
reduce
space.
windows. Thank you. Let me see if I have an image on that. Yeah, we can see it here. Originally, the building was very symmetrical. Now, this is the elevations along Farmers Lane. You see there's lots of glass. We had the same condition at the back, and we too were concerned about the loss of privacy for the neighbors. So I will find, it's hard to see, but if you look at the upper image, the far left side, those windows are very, very small. And those are the minimum size windows that were allowed by code to offer fire egress out of bedrooms. So we removed the French doors and the balconies off of that side of the building that faces the neighbors. And also, you can see that on the circular elements, we've also removed windows. I'll back up again. Let me go back up to the front. So you can see on Farmers Lane, the lower image, the circular elements are fully glazed. When we went to the back of the building to help the neighbors, we took out windows. Let me see if the pointer will work. Yeah. Normally, there would be glazing here. There would be glazing here. And we took all of that glass out. So the living rooms on the back side of the building do not have nearly the amount of glass as what faces Farmers Lane. Is there any other architectural question that I could help with?
Let me just check here. I know he indicated he wants the 8-foot fence, which we can take up.
Right, and we
here.
discussed that with
Yeah.
landscape, and we're perfectly fine doing whatever they want us to do.
And then I'm looking at my notes.
I do want to support the neighbors about the parking issue, not so much as far as this building, but I don't know if the council realizes that Montgomery Village itself, one of the policies they have is a lot of people that work in Montgomery Village, in fact, are asked to park into the neighborhood because there's limited amount of parking in Montgomery Village. So we have witnessed that situation. And certainly, even it came up in the neighborhood meeting, I know the developer of this project would very much support anything that we could do to help create some sort of a parking district for their street. If that would help, if they could create a parking district with permits or whatever, because it is not fair for them that they're already working at a disadvantage. Of course, with our 26 units and 29 parking spaces, our goal is to accommodate all of our parking that we need on our site. And part of the CC&Rs is that this is a condo project. So people buying into this project wouldn't understand. You only get one parking space. We have some controls that we can do with the people who buy these condos.
Okay. I have some notes, again, from a prior testimony that you may or may not be able to answer. She was asking about, and these are considerations that maybe you as the architect looked at. She was looking at, could there have been more than 5 affordable units? What would be the issue to reduce the height to 3 stories? Did you consider underground parking and a larger, like 20-foot setback from the fence line?
So let's take them one at a time. So,
Okay.
So if you will, if you repeat that, let's do one by one.
Okay, the first one is considering more than 5 affordable housing units.
That I can't answer. We'd have to have Steve address that.
Okay. The height, she was talking about a concern, and was there consideration given to reducing the height to 3 stories, and maybe just repeating the reason why
Right.
it's at 4?
Well, of course, as we talked about before, there's a lot of constraints on the site. So even without the density bonus, we still have to go to 4 stories just to meet the city's general plan.
Okay. And then she was also asking about a consideration for underground parking.
When you introduce underground parking, then you have to introduce a whole series of ramps to get to the underground parking, and that creates a lot of real difficult geometric conditions. We have a high water table at this site. We're right on the creek, and it would be an ADA accessibility nightmare for the site because we'd have to have such long ramps to get down to an underground parking garage. If the ramps were outside the building, if the ramps are inside the building, it takes away the available space for the stalls. It's just not that large of a site to do an underground garage. And of course, the cost of digging down is very expensive.
Okay, and then she was also asking about a greater setback between the lots, like a 20-foot setback to the building.
We have 20 foot.
You do have 20
That's what we
foot,
have.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So then her other 2 concerns had to do with the affordable housing. So, Mr.
Steve, do you wanna-
Sharp, do you want to answer those?
I think your staff can maybe do a better job of that, but
Okay.
the density bonus is a calculation. 18% was the calculation based upon the size of the property, and the requirement is that five of the units would have to be affordable. That's the maximum number of units that meet the affordability requirements.
Okay. And then staff may have to answer this too, maybe a technical issue. She was asking why not 65 plus instead of 55 plus?
Your zoning code and I think state law pretty much governs that it's 55, at least at this point. You know as well as I that people over 55 are still working and still have families, and but it may be arcane at this point, but that's what the provision is now. I think I did want to point out on the parking too that the restriction would be 1 condominium, 1 parking space. There's been some discussion about maybe separating the parking from the units themselves as far as purchasing, such that if you didn't have a car, you wouldn't need a parking space. It may be up to the homeowners association to be able to either sell those or allow some flexibility in how those are used.
Okay.
I think that was something that was done with your Dietrich project as well.
Okay, great. And so I think that addresses most of the applicant issues with the public, but Ms. Murray, maybe you could come up and readdress the parking issue, our zoning code requirements for the senior housing and affordability issues, and also maybe address Mr. Paul's concerns about feeling left out of the process.
Let me start with the parking. The parking for senior housing, the requirement is 1 parking space per unit, and then I think it's a guest space for every 10 units, and they meet that requirement. We have talked about, although it's not included in the project, doing unbundled parking, which Steve was just talking about, where they would have the ability to either rent or sell parking spaces, which does occur in other similar types of projects. And it would provide incentive for occupants to have fewer automobiles. But again, when they move in, they would understand that they have 1 parking space. So the guest parking will not be allowed for any permanent vehicles. So as far as the noticing, I did look back at my noticing while he was, Mr. Qualls was up here, and his address is on the notice. I can't explain why sometimes one resident gets one and another one doesn't, other than they might be mistaken as junk mail, A or B. They may have just gotten lost in the mail, but the notice did go out, and his address is on the list of mailing labels.
Okay. And then I know there was reference in the staff materials that the neighborhood is already potentially pursuing sort of a parking plan for their neighborhood. Do you know anything about that, or can you maybe give them some assistance as to how to accomplish that, and especially with what Mr. Gilbert is saying about Montgomery Village employees parking there? It's a bigger problem, Mr.
Yeah.
Bernstein. It's not this project's problem, and so what can they do about that?
There is a process for a parking zone, and a couple of the neighbors, both from the Gilbert Street and another street across Farmers Lane, have been in touch with our parking department to start the process for the parking zone. I don't know the details of that process, but we have a representative from the parking department here who, if you have questions about that. But there has been communication between the two. I've spoken to several neighbors and provided the phone number for parking. I don't know where they are in that process.
Okay, but you are referring them and saying there is some method that they could
Yes,
utilize.
we have those zones set up around the city. You know, the JC neighborhood, I think they have one down on South A Street, and it's just a permit that people have, residents have, and then people without permits have a restricted amount of time that they can park, whether it's 1 hour or 2 hours, and that can be something that's worked out with the city. But it's something, I believe there's an annual fee. I think it's a minimal annual fee, not animal fee, but anyways, but Janet from parking is here, and she would be way better to answer that question than me.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, commissioners, how about if we begin with questions of the applicant? If you have any further questions, yeah, Vice Chair Edmondson.
I wanted to get to the privacy question again, and I understand the steps that were taken architecturally and that you couldn't go further when it came to window size for code reasons. Are there any additional steps that could be taken? What rooms of the floor plan do those windows look out from? Is frosting any kind of realistic option? I know these are windows that must be openable by the code, I would imagine, so that's always going to be a feature of them, but is there any additional privacy protection?
That's a good idea because we can frost glass. And for example, what I would never do because of just being claustrophobic, I would never frost a window all the way up. I think you should be able to look out and see some clouds in the sky. But if you wanted to condition, for example, what's on the screen, that image is up, for some of these bedroom windows, we could frost them up halfway or something like that, because the window head, the units have 9-foot ceilings, the window heads go to 8 feet. The sills of the windows are about 3 feet off the floor, so the window's about 5 feet tall. So if we frost it up to eye line, then that would give, I think, what you're talking about. And I think that would be perfectly fine.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Gronica.
Just follow up.
Sure.
Follow up on that point. The way, in essence, you shrunk down the size of those windows, I'm assuming vertically. If you sit on a couch or whatever in the living room looking out with your reconfigured design, do you then look down on these Gilbert Avenue homes?
Now, what we can do, actually, the living rooms are these circular elements in the corners. Let me point to them. There it is. Okay. So this entire circular form is the living room. What we can do is, even if we frost the windows facing the homes, these windows here around the, I don't know where the arrow disappeared. There it goes. We can leave these cleared because those are directed away from the houses. So you would not have a boxed-in living room. The windows that you see along the end down here are master bedrooms at the end. And I could look at maybe, the building is tight, but I could see what I could do to control that. I'd hate to frost the entire window. I think it would just, you feel like you're in a prison.
Okay, are you done? Any other questions?
Yeah.
You have another one before I move down to this side?
Yes, getting to, I don't know if I want to change the subject to.
No, we don't yet.
But I mean, it's on Are we talking
It'll-
just windows at this point, or are we talking height as well? Building height?
I just wanted to jump in quickly because some of the questions seem to be going more toward the design-related
right.
element. That's perfectly fine. Conditioning that is a little problematic because we have land use actions before the commission tonight, as you know. However, those can be comments that are forwarded to the design review board and can be considered by the design review board as part of their action. So I just wanted to get that in as to inform your discussion now.
Okay. What I'd like to do is make sure that, we just have all the questions for the one expert as much as possible, so that if we're moving to something that requires another expert, let's...
No, I was...
You were going to ask him, okay. That's all I'm
Shifting
looking
from
for.
windows to building height, and it was I guess in concept review, the design review board suggesting, in essence, covering those screens or fronting those screens. Would there be any consideration if building height? I realize you've got a concession there, but you'll be doing excavation on the site anyway, and especially as it relates to the garage areas. Any possibility, or does it present particular problems if you over-excavate by an additional 2 feet and drop it down?
The accessibility code is for pedestrian accessibility is you have to travel, if you drop 1 inch, you travel 12 inches. So if we drop the building 2 feet into the ground, I have to create 24-foot long ramps just to drop 2 feet. And it really wreaks havoc on just about everything, not the least of which is drainage. Yeah. And we have the minimum garage. We went ahead and we talked to mechanical and structural to see what our minimum heights would have to be in the garage to clear an accessibility van, plumbing, structural. We've actually brought MKM on board already, trying to resolve this building height to get it within the 45 feet.
Okay. Commissioner Duggan?
Can you talk a little bit about the trash enclosure location, and did you consider any other location, like further away from the property fence?
I'll go to the site plan here. There's not many places, if any, to put the trash enclosure. They did not want, the city specifically, fire department and just accessibility, they don't want a trash truck to come in and just stop. And the reason being is that Farmers Lane is so busy. They don't want somebody coming down Farmers Lane and turning to come into their apartment and not being able to make the turn. They wanted the trash enclosure to be in a certain distance, so we don't create a log jam at the entranceway when the trash truck is there. So of course you can see that you really don't want to put the trash enclosure in front of the front doors of the building, which are here. And there's trees here. We even wrapped the sidewalk around the trees. Need to get into the garage. Need to have a covered accessible parking space. So you literally run out of room by the time you get down to where you can have a trash enclosure. The trash company likes it here because they can pick up the trash and then they can back the truck into here and pull out. So we've even worked with the trash company to figure out what's the best geometry for them too. Yeah.
Mr. Rubble, you have questions? I'm sorry, I didn't know you were done.
This might be architectural, but it might be sound, so can I ask?
Why don't you ask and then we'll table it if it's something that he
So
can't
I know that
answer.
some of the units that are closer to Farmers Lane are required to have like mechanical ventilation. So have the compressors for the AC units been located on the site, and where are they going to be located?
On the roof.
On the roof, okay.
Right, we can put everything up on the roof. In fact, the building, one of its great advantages is great for solar ready. Because of its height and because of its angle and the flat roof and the parapets, it's a beautiful application for solar ready application.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Okay, Commissioner Rummel.
I'm on the shadow deal, so maybe we could throw up that slide.
The shadow?
Right?
Sure.
Yeah. And it's
Summer?
Either one is fine.
Okay.
It's really more of a kind of a conceptual question, and it might be my small brain on this. we talk about no trees and with trees. I have no idea, so polar ends. What's reality? What is going to be on that site? So
Trees.
Okay, so we shouldn't really be then looking at, correct me if I'm wrong, the top half, we should be looking at the bottom half. So there would be shade impact.
Which is already there because there's trees already there. So the reason I was bringing up, the primary concern was what kind of shadowing would the building itself cause. That's why I was focusing on the upper. But the fact is, the site currently has trees on it and currently already shadows the neighbors. And you can see that on both, both of them, particularly in the morning.
Okay.
But you can see that in both of them with trees, by the time you get to noon, the shadowing stops. It is a morning condition that they've got over there on Gilbert.
Right. I just want to make sure that we're talking about what is in practical terms reality rather than...
The reality, of course, there would be trees, which are there already, which causes shadowing.
Okay. And so then on the 9 a.m., it looks like, I just want to make sure I'm interpreting all of this right.
You're talking about
the bottom left?
There?
Actually, I'm talking about the bottom left now. Yeah, because I want to make sure I'm looking at what the neighbors are actually going to experience.
Then what we would do is we'd look at the bottom row for both pages. So in the summer, this would be their condition at 9. There would be shadowing in the backyard caused by the trees, a little bit by the building. Then by noon, the shadowing in the backyard is only caused across here by the trees, not by the building, and certainly by the afternoon. It's just whatever trees are right here.
Okay.
But yeah, the reality situation, of course, the trees would cause a shadow.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Commissioner Peterson, any questions of Mr. Gilbert? Okay, great.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, wait, Commissioner Dagan.
I've thought of two more little things.
Okay.
So there's no lighting plan for the site that's in the packet that we've got. So I'm just, I assume something's been thought about how.
We have done a lighting plan. It's very low key. It's just basically we don't want to turn the place into Las Vegas. So the building is really it's down lighting, of course, where you don't see the points of light, and it's done with sconces on the building at important entryways. Of course, we will need to light the back walkway, and until that's fully designed, this back walkway here, the idea would be to line it with bollards. Keep everything down low to the ground, what I call Hawaii style, where everything's just down.
And then one more thing about Mr. Qualls, I believe, mentioned that people can walk through his property. So how far towards the creek is the fence along the west line going to go?
Well, from what I understand, of course, we go back here to the site plan. It's kind of, we call this the bridge to nowhere. Maybe Quadrica can help on this a little bit, but I know this has been, the walkway has been a source of discussion. Certainly the fence would come all the way down to this point here, at least to this point, which is not only the corner of his property is right here. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to back up. There we go. The dark line you see here is actually a setback line, but obviously the fence itself would not go across the bike path because it defeats the purpose of the bike path. What I don't know and what has been discussed is what is the plan for the bike path. I know we're supposed to develop it behind us, but to be honest, I don't know what the condition of the bike path is beyond that point.
But it would be possible for somebody to walk from Gilbert Lane around the end of the fence and...
Well, they would be able to walk here. Now, once again, I don't know what the condition of the fencing is between the bike path and the cul-de-sac on Gilbert. So not only would they go past this point, but they would have to walk down the back path to a certain point to get to Gilbert, and maybe that can help to be addressed there. If there's concern about people on Gilbert walking down to the bike path, then walking up the bike path.
Well, I just heard concern about people parking on Gilbert and walking to the property.
Right.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Commissioner, that was your question? Okay. And then, do you know what path improvements you're going to be required to do? I think there was some reference in there that, you know, there was going to be furniture, but now that can't be accommodated. Do you have an idea? Of what
On the
you're-
bike path?
On the walking path and bike path, yeah.
I think I need some help on this one. I just don't know much about the bike path, where it currently stands. At one time, when it was a meandering path, you can see that on our rendering, there was an attempt to have some furniture.
Right.
You can see here, which is an early. Now, what you see here, it got turned into this airport landing strip right now. And I don't know what the plan is for that.
A little historic note, I'll have Kevin come down and talk about that, but the bike path was dedicated as part of a minor subdivision in 1990, so the right-of-way is there. We'll be developing a Class 2 bike path that was a pedestrian access, and the greater width on the bike path improvements really doesn't allow for the furniture that was going to be placed in there, as part of a concept. But Kevin may be able to tell you specifics.
Okay.
Rob from engineering is here. He could probably talk about that as well.
Thank you. Good evening, Kevin Doble. Yeah, we were conditioned by Public Works Department to provide a Class 1 bike path, which is the highest level bike path. It's an 8-foot wide paved surface, basically. So it's difficult for us to actually meander it too much through that area and create the seating environment that we originally thought would work really well there. So that's kind of what we're left with, is an 8-foot wide paved path. With the intention, I guess, at some point in the future, the path will connect and continue to the west.
Okay. Any other questions about the bike path issue? So we don't need Mr. Sprinkle at this point. Okay. Ms. Murray?
We've all been brainstorming, so the path is called out in the bike ped master plan, so that's the goal, and it doesn't, in the plan, it doesn't stop there. But this is how we get them installed, is through development. So it will be kind of a blunt end for a time, and yeah, that's the way it's. We don't have a definite plan. There was a plan when the project was reviewed by the Waterways Committee. They looked at, I think the primary issue that was discussed was actually a pathway that connected the structure to that public pathway. Not so much the design of the pathway. There was furniture involved at that point, and we haven't seen the final design plan for the pathway.
Okay, great. Any other questions of the applicant and his team? Okay, one more? Okay, Commissioner Rummel.
Just two quick questions. More for their willingness to accommodate some of the points that have been brought up. Is now appropriate to?
No, we'll
Okay.
do that in comments. Thanks. Okay. I have a couple of questions of staff. Does anyone else have questions of staff? Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Duggan.
You didn't mention, but I assume that Caltrans weighed in on the driveway location? Because this
Caltrans
is
did
how we
review
vote.
the plans. In fact, at the very beginning, that was one of the questions that a commissioner brought up. At the very beginning of the project, in staff's original issues letter, we brought up actually the widening of Farmers Lane, which will be I guess a joint endeavor between city and Caltrans. There is no project, and Caltrans basically, they gave us no comments. We called back to, we checked back in with Caltrans and actually questioned, they gave us their canned response, which is something that we address in all of our project review. But we reached out to them intentionally, and if you need a little bit more detail on that, Rob can certainly answer that, but they had no issue with the location of the driveway.
Okay. And then I just had a comment on the DAC report. I think there's a typo that says 15%, not 18% for the density bonus.
Thank you. I'm not surprised at that. Can you tell me where it is on the DAC?
I think it's page 6 on the DAC, yeah.
We'll get that and correct it, because it is an 18%.
Yeah. Okay.
Numbers.
Any other questions of staff right now? Yeah, Commissioner Gronica.
On one of the questions that we had asked of you, of staff, related to the trees on the site and replacement trees and so on. So if I'm understanding your response there will be no need to either replace or replant removed trees or plant trees in another location other than this site because you've upsized all the trees that are going to be on the site. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Did you have a question? Yeah, Vice Chair Edmondson.
I just wanted to ask a general question about the parking districts, because that hasn't come up in a while since I've been up here, but I'd like to just maybe hear a little bit about the standards and the process that need to be met for the establishment and the role that the neighborhood plays in the process.
And Janet Reisner from the Parking Department.
Hello. So the rules for designating a parking district, which would be a residential district, would be that 60% of the residential homes, the people who live there, have to agree that that's what they want. Then there would be a permit process where single-family homes would receive up to 3 residential permits, and multifamily homes, which I did go over there today, and I don't believe there are any multifamily homes there, but they would receive 1 per unit. If the neighborhood would like this to be designated as a residential zone, then they would need to fill out an application and get the required permits get the signatures to have that occur. And then we have parking enforcement officers that we would send over there. Let's say it was between the hours of 9 to 6, which is pretty much what most of our residential areas are, with the exception of the fairgrounds and the JC. And we would patrol anyone who does not have a residential permit, would have a limited period of time, say 1 hour or 2 hours, and upon the expiration of that time, they would be cited.
Would you say that the idea of the parking district is more about limiting quality of life impacts from coming and going, or more about the supply of parking? Is that, are they both the reason that these districts exist, or more about one or the other in your opinion?
Both of those reasons are why they exist. These districts are never, or residential areas are never, we never approach the residents and ask for them. The residents approach us and ask for it. Recently we've had several areas where people have wanted it, but they've not been able to get the 60% of the signatures, so it hasn't happened.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay.
Commissioner Veronica.
Just follow up on a couple of those. So that would be 60% of the houses, assuming, or homes on Gilbert Street itself.
Yes.
So a parking district could be, in essence, confined just to that street.
Well, yes. So it would be 60% of the houses on Gilbert. Other people would not have input on that unless they were also applying for a residential zone. And it would actually have to come from the residents that are there. So if the home is a rental, it is not from the landlord, it's from the residents.
Okay. Then, given the example that a member of the public pointed out in terms of, I think it was a dental office who basically is telling their staff, perhaps they're telling their patients to park on that street, and a district, if I'm understanding you, would, on Gilbert, there would be visitors to the area could park up on that street for an hour or 2. Does that even help what would be considered, in essence, kind of an abuse of the system if any particular business, in this case a dental office, whatever, is telling their people to use that street? In other words, they could be patients there an hour, 2 hours, or beyond. Is there any way the city controls that?
We don't control that. It's public streets, so anyone can park there. However, we would just control the length of time that they could park there. So if you were going in just for a quick fitting of an appliance, then yes, you might want to park there. But if you were going in there for a longer procedure, then you would park there at your risk of getting a citation. Now, of course, that does always impact other surrounding areas. However, certainly employees would not be able to park there all day, because once the expiration of the time occurs, then they're not able to return to the block for the remainder of the calendar day.
Thank you.
Commissioner Weeks.
Thank you, Janet. Is there a cost to participate in a parking district?
Yes, so it is an administrative fee of $20 for the permits issued. If you are entitled to 3 permits, the $20 is, there's one $20 fee as long as you apply for all 3 permits at the same time. However, if you apply for one this month and one next month and one next month, each time you apply, it's $20. So most people apply for all of their permits at the same time.
And is there an annual fee at all?
It's the $20
Okay.
to get it renewed. So each year they have to submit proof of residency so that it can't be used incorrectly, and their registration, some form of like a PG&E bill, and their vehicle does have to be currently registered.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on parking districts? Any other questions of staff? I have a couple for you, Ms. Murray.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so my questions go to just really clarifying, and for myself and the public, and differentiating between the senior housing overlay and the affordable housing component. So we're going to be rezoning into this senior overlay, and I understand that 80% has to be marketed to 55 or older, but that's a minimum. It could be marketed completely as a senior project.
Correct.
Okay.
It could, yeah, they have to have a minimum of 80% of the units have to be occupied by at least one person that's 55 years or older.
And who is going to be monitoring that and dealing with that? And how are they going to do that?
That is going to be our housing department, and in fact, it's probably best for me to bring Megan down because she can answer all those questions, and she'll be a really good resource for the affordable ones too.
Okay, good.
Good evening, I'm Megan Bassinger, manager of the Santa Rosa Housing Trust. So as Susie mentioned, the senior overlay district requires 80% of the units to be occupied by at least one person who's over 55 years of age. That's going to be recorded against the property to put owners on notice. We will be doing that on a biannual basis. So the occupants, whether that's owners or tenants, will be required to provide us with age certification. And this is something that we do in other units throughout the city that have age restrictions.
And what happens if for some reason at the time it's reviewed, they're out of compliance? What do you do with the residents?
I don't have a good answer right now, but because it's 80%, it can float throughout the entire development.
Okay.
As long as one occupant of a unit is over 55, that would meet the requirement.
Okay. And then, so that's the senior housing overlay. We have 5 units that are going to be affordable for sale units. Who's going to be handling that?
So that is the density increase contract, which is also handled by the Department of Housing and Community Services. Again, these are agreements that the department has been handling since inception, and we do on a regular basis. It is up to the developer to market the units. They identify the income restrictions. The qualified buyers provide their income information to the department, and we have staff who reviews these on a regular basis and provides the interested buyers in acceptance as the eligible buyer.
Okay.
And then once they qualify and purchase the home, they can stay there into perpetuity. So if they're, as long as they are the owner, if their income is to change.
Okay. And this is probably a remote possibility, but those 5 affordable units, because of the 80% restriction, actually could be sold to non-seniors.
Correct.
Okay.
And that, again, applies to the overall development.
The overall development. Okay. So I just want to make sure that we were differentiating about that and learn a little bit about who's handling what.
So both those would be administered by the Housing and Community Services Department.
Okay, great, thanks. Any other questions? Yeah, thought that might do it. Okay, Commissioner Rumble.
Sorry, but that line kind of opened up one that I wanted to ask. Just in practical terms, and this is partly for me, but also I think for the audience, when we're talking about affordability, we're talking about moderate, right? So 120 AMI. So what does that mean for an income? And what does that mean for, I think I know the answer, but I kind of want everybody else to know it. And what does that mean for a sale price?
So these are off the top of my head. So for a 2-person household, I believe it's about $80,000 a year would be the maximum. A sales price, our maximum sales prices are determined by the bedroom size and then also by the interest rate at the time of sale. So we have a sales price chart that we post on our website. I want to say that right now for a 2- to 3-bedroom unit, it's about $340,000 to $350,000. And again, that fluctuates with the current interest rates because that's what's driving the affordability.
Okay. Commissioner Duggan?
How is it controlled for resale? Say somebody buys one of the affordable units, and then after a few years they want to sell and move. So how do you keep the price down, and how is that controlled?
So this is, again, a common issue that we encounter. There's a resale restriction. The subsequent buyers would also need to be income qualified, would need to submit the same information to us in order to be eligible to purchase the unit. And the density increase would be for 55 years.
But also, and the sales price is also limited to some?
Correct. The sales price would continue to be subject to the maximum sales price based on the interest rates at the time of sale.
Okay.
So those would alter as time goes on.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Great, thank you. Thank you. And any other questions of staff right now? Okay, so I just want to confirm what I think I'm hearing from staff. Our purview tonight, we're looking at the rezoning, the appropriateness of the density bonus. We're looking at the tentative map. The design review board will be reviewing the design issues. That's where Mr. Rose is pointing out some of our conversation. We need to make sure that we're sticking with our purview and allow the design review to do theirs, perhaps with the exception of the height of the fence.
The height of the fence is actually that's a land use.
Okay.
So the design of the fence is a design review issue. Okay. The height of the fence is a land use issue, and you can put that on there.
Okay, that's
and
what I'm trying to
the density bonus and the rezoning are a recommendation to council. The tentative map is the final action.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, so again, tonight we have a number of resolutions. So in keeping with trying to keep it from being too confusing, I'm going to go ahead and ask for somebody to move the first rezoning resolution. And what I will do is have you each make your comments fully on the full project. I'll collect them, and if there's a place where we need to insert them in further resolutions, we'll go ahead and do that as the resolutions come up. But just for clarity's purposes for us, once this resolution is made, we'll go ahead and discuss the entire project. Does that make sense? Okay. So would somebody like to move that resolution?
I'll make a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Santa Rosa recommending to City Council rezoning of property located at 201 Farmers Lane to the R318SH Multifamily Residential Senior Housing Zoning District, file number PRJ16-018, and waive further reading.
I'll second.
Okay. Okay, we'll go with Vice Chair Edmondson on that one. So the rezoning resolution was moved by Commissioner Duggan, seconded by Vice Chair Edmondson. And Vice Chair Edmondson, you want to start this?
Of course. I think this is an excellent project. I want to run through my understanding of these issues and what we're doing here tonight. So the senior housing overlay that we are going to act on recommending or not recommending, the primary effect of that, besides ensuring the population that is going to be able to live in these units, the primary effect of it is the parking reduction. And I think that the policy that the city adopted in its zoning code really answers the question. As we've heard a couple of times tonight, the project is completely in line with the number of spaces that are required by the code. So it's a judgment that the city council has made in the past that seniors may not need the same number of parking spaces as people at different points in their lives. And especially for a project with more affordable units, I think it makes perfect sense for there to be fewer parking spaces. And as a general comment on parking requirements that I seem to figure out a way to make every meeting, I think that a lot of problems that we have as a city with traffic, with how spread out everything is, how long we have to sit in our cars to get places, and how expensive housing has become, a lot of it can be traced back in no small part to excessive parking requirements. And I think that the senior housing overlay is a nice step toward bringing a little bit more of a person-centric vision of land use for the city instead of a car-centric version, and avoiding the assumption that we are forever going to be made to live in a place where the only option you have to live an effective, ordinary life is to have a car. So we have to make the decisions that pull us out of that sort of spiral into becoming more and more car dependent, because traffic and congestion come from cars. They don't come as an order of nature from human beings. They come from their cars. So I see the overlay as reducing the parking requirement. I think it's completely reasonable, so I support that action. The density bonus is tied to the fact that we're going to be getting some affordable units in this project. It's exactly why the state has a density bonus law. It's a judgment that was made by the state that these are projects that California needs. And I don't think that the city can make the very high findings that it would need to make to override the state law on that point. I don't see that the 4 extra units, or I think it's 4, I don't see that they will create such an injury to the public welfare that would justify us making those findings, so I can't make them, and I will support the density bonus. And the tentative map extension, it's a project that's totally in line with the general plan and all the other findings that I have to make for that point. So I think that about covers it. I think it's an excellent project. I welcome the idea that we are going to have denser housing along a major transit corridor. It is difficult to be a resident of a neighborhood that's right on the line between a much denser, high-traffic area and then a state highway, which is Farmers Lane, and then a single-family neighborhood. And these edge zones, they see there's a sharp transition from one to the other, but I'm encouraged by the thorough, diligent work that everybody did to make sure that privacy impacts can be as minimal as possible. That's a very legitimate concern, and every step should be taken to ensure that privacy is safeguarded. That the shadowing is as minimal as possible, given the setbacks and the constraints of the site. And that the parking impacts, we've got our parking district program that was very excellently described a few minutes ago. The public streets are paid for by public tax money and their public property. And in general, people can park wherever they like, but we have a structure in place where if the nuisance effects of the public parking becomes so great that people in neighborhoods have a way of taking control of the process and bringing it back in line. And I think that's a great balance, and I think that's the way that those issues have to be taken up, because we can't stop housing and critical projects on the basis of something that we have a much less harsh way of correcting. We have our district program. So I very much support the project.
Okay. Commissioner Groningen.
Just a few points here. I too find the design as being particularly attractive, and I think it's real critical for that particular location there, Farmers Lane. If you're coming westbound on 12, turning left, going southbound on Farmer, I think you need an inviting, attractive design, and I believe the developer has come up with a rather good one. I understand it's been approved at concept design level with the design review board. I would just encourage, and you can communicate this to the design review board, that they stay with that design as best possible. I think the curved linear views, the turrets as they call them, is particularly attractive. I think, however, some design things may also be land use issues, and I would take umbrage with the point about the windows. If you're using that site and you're occupying a room or apartment or whatever, and you're looking out and potentially impacting the privacy of your now new neighbors, that to me does reflect use of the land. I wouldn't assume that we should tell the developer whether the frosts are windows or not, but I think you need to take into consideration those sight lines as it relates to the use of the building as well as privacy of the neighbors. Then on the, I certainly support the rezoning of this area and the increased density bonus. I think it gets us to at least one more step is where we want to be as a city in terms of increasing housing opportunities. This would be more at the moderate level, but I think it's very worthwhile. As to parking, I would caution you. I understand the need, and I support this in terms of the one space per unit requirement, so on. But you have to, when you do that, and in essence, it's showing itself right now is what the rolling impact of restricting parking one location may mean to somewhere, a street down the line, whatever. So it may be all our intent to reduce the amount of traffic and amount of congestion, whatever, but you need to do it smart. I would therefore say, and this will keep it rolling, is that if I lived in that on Gilbert Street, I'm surprised they haven't already gone to a parking district. I don't know the reasons why, and I would further suggest to them that they consider the 1 hour limit, period, because it sounds like people are specifically telling from businesses or whatever, people, you parked in that guy's neighborhood, and I don't think that's fair. With all that, I really believe it's a good project, and I support it across the board.
Commissioner Duggan.
Okay, yeah, I'm also in support of the project. I think the senior housing rezoning is fine. even though I do take exception to 55 being the senior limit, because it seems awfully young to me. The density bonus, I think that's great, providing some affordable housing units. I did personally have some concerns about the height of the building, but I know it meets the code for the height and the setback. I like that the parking is covered and it's under screened from view. Let's see, and I know I appreciate all the iterations that the design team has gone through, because it's a tight site, and with the creek setback and the strange shape and all that, there's not that much you can do. So I appreciate all the thought that's gone into doing exactly what you've done, what you've come up with. I would encourage the design review board to ask for frosted windows on the side that's near the fence for privacy. I'm in favor of the 8-foot tall fence. Let's see, I'm also really in favor of the parking district for Gilbert Street. I used to live in the JC area that's covered by the parking district that's up north towards the JC itself, and it made a huge difference for the residents of those blocks that were covered by the parking district. So I encourage people to do that, because as Commissioner Gronica has said, it's not fair for businesses to send their employees and their customers to park on other people's streets. Let's see. Making sure I don't leave anything out. I think I've covered it. And let's see. And the tentative map, like I said, I appreciate all the thoughtfulness that went into creating the design, so I'm supportive of it.
Commissioner Rumble.
Thank you. I think Commissioner Edmondson really summed up a couple of the issues that I'm feeling quite nicely. The one being sort of the juxtaposition of a residential neighborhood right against a much more heavily used area, including a highway. And that's a difficult issue, but it's not necessarily the problem or the issue to be solved by this particular project. And similarly on the related to the density bonus, I can't get to a place where I would say no to it. It seems like it's completely appropriate and it follows the rules, which we in the state have laid out. I would really hope that we all kind of echo the same support for whatever privacy measures can be put in place. They're not maybe ours to call, whether it be frosted glass or whatever, but I would really encourage that as a way to at least ease some of the difficulty that I would have on height and privacy and so on, that I'm willing to sort of go along with, because it provides so much of a benefit on the other hand. Related to parking, the question of, I really agree with Commissioner Gronica that sort of the frustration or the fury of a business saying, go park, whether it be Montgomery Village or the orthodontists, go park in the neighborhood. That's not a good solution. But the question of why haven't you done it already? And I know it's almost a rhetorical question, but people just aren't savvy about how to go about doing it, even if the process is super easy and pretty unburdensome cost. I actually didn't know. And my part of the JC neighborhood doesn't have a district, and God help me if I come home when class is in session. So I am now going to start collecting signatures. And on that point, I would really just like I'm encouraging the applicant to look for every way to enhance privacy. I don't think that we can make this a condition at all, but I would really want to encourage the applicant to help the neighborhood bird dog this issue around parking, because it does take somebody who knows how to collect signatures and knows how to fill out a form in a city office And I happen to know the applicant's representative can fill out government forms quite well. We filled out very similar ones. So I would really look to the applicant to help the neighborhood and to be a good neighbor. Not to say that you haven't been so far, but to be a good neighbor going forward and help them solve this issue. I don't know what to say about the shadow other than, it's going to be there, and I don't know how you minimize it. And I don't know, other than lowering the height of the building, which I'm not suggesting we do. I mean, that's just going to be an impact of the development. But I'm extremely sympathetic and empathetic to that impact. And, if we could change the path of the sun, maybe. I know that we've talked about an 8-foot fence. I saw in the staff report saying that there would be an 8-foot fence already. So I'm not sure what the issue is or the request is for height, but if there's a call to go higher than an 8-foot fence, I don't know. But just another area I would encourage the applicant to continue to work with the neighbors to resolve that issue, what exactly the height ought to be, and if it's different than what's proposed, can that happen? I think that's all that I've got to say about it, other than I'm supportive of the project.
Commissioner Weeks?
I also am supportive of the project. I think it's a great project for an infill site such as that. There's great access to public transportation and services in the neighborhood. I also object to seniors being 55. I think that the addition of the affordable units is much needed in Santa Rosa, especially on the ownership side. And I also appreciate the developer looking at all the different privacy issues that they can come up with. And I think, that makes a good neighbor. So I think it's probably all been said before.
Thank you. Commissioner Peterson?
Well, I'd like to echo the comments of my fellow commissioners. I think this is a great project. It seems well suited to the site with the adjustments that the applicant has made in regard to community concerns. In particular, I want to echo Commissioner Edmondson's comments on the parking and note, as Commissioner Weeks did, that I think this is in addition to the senior housing aspect, I think it's a great project to have a reduced parking need because of the location that's so close to major public transit routes, as well as grocery stores, shopping, things that the residents would need on a sort of daily basis. I again echo the support for an 8-foot fence. Again, if that's something that we need to address directly, as well as the encouragement of forming a parking district. It sounds like there's some bad actors on the corner that have been taking advantage of the public street. The only final thought I have is I want to thank the public for their comments, their engagements, and I do hear the concern about the lack of communication or the lack of feeling included. I think that's an important part of any project like this, and it's a big concern of mine, and I will certainly work with staff, fellow commissioners, if there are gaps that we can fill. I think it's a need with something like this. So for those reasons, the reasons my fellow commissioners, I would support this project and make all necessary findings for the rezoning density bonus and approve the tentative map.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm also in favor of the project. This is a great infill project. The rezoning that we did in 2008, I think, anticipated the need for higher density in this area to better utilize existing infrastructure, to take advantage of the fact that there is public transit, shopping, potential jobs very, very nearby. So I think this is a project that meets current council goals about our housing crisis need, our needs for increasing affordable housing, as well as our general plan goals to increase senior housing and affordable housing. So I think the applicant very, very sensitively designed this building to be sensitive to privacy issues. So I really appreciate the thought that went into it, and it really is a beautiful building. It's 2 buildings. It's very well designed, and you know, I think you hear our comments about if there's other places to help increase the loss of privacy, we would all be in favor of that being taken up with the design review board. So, and I think what we'll do is we'll take up the 8-foot fence when we get to the tentative map and see if we need to do a formal correction of the DAC at that time. So for now, we'll do the rezoning. That was moved by Commissioner Duggan, seconded by Vice Chair Edmondson, and your votes, please. And that passes with 7 ayes. And the next resolution is the density bonus. So would someone like to move that?
Okay, I'll move the resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Santa Rosa making findings and determinations and recommending that council approve a density bonus for Farmers Lane Senior Housing located at 201 Farmers Lane, assessor's parcel number 014-071-093, file number PRJ 16-018, and waive further reading.
I'll second.
Okay, so that was moved by Commissioner Duggan, seconded by Vice Chair Edmondson. Any other discussion on the density bonus? Not seeing any. Your votes, please. And that passes with 7 ayes. Did I say 6 ayes last time? Or, I did?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, good.
And I'll move a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Santa Rosa approving the Farmers Lane Senior Housing tentative map located at 201 Farmers Lane, assessor's parcel number 014-071-093, file number PRJ 16-018, and waive further reading.
And do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so that was moved by Commissioner Duggan, seconded by Vice Chair Edmondson. Let me just check with staff if we are going to do a friendly amendment and change the height of the fence. Where would that happen?
That would happen as a condition of approval from the Planning Commission. I don't believe if it's called out in the staff report, I don't believe it's called out in the DAC report, and that was separating fact on paper from comments at the design review board. So
there's nothing on the DAC that refers to a 6-foot fence?
I don't know in the DAC, but I don't believe we've specified anywhere in the project the height of the fence. So the applicant had talked about a 6-foot fence. The DRB talked about an 8-foot fence in response to neighbors' comments who attended that meeting, the concept meeting. And so if you would like to increase the height of the fence to 8 feet, that would be a condition of approval from the Planning Commission.
And so we would just add that.
Yes.
And then do we need to formally correct the 18% issue on the DAC from here or not? I think you said that was on number
It's on page 6 of the resolution.
Page 6 of the not the DAC of the resolution. Okay.
It's the DAC is part of the resolution. Yeah, so I think it's page 2 under the description of the DAC report, which is also page 6 of the resolution.
Right.
So it's right under the description, it's right up front, and it's a 15%, and it should be formally corrected, yes, to 18%.
Okay, so do you care to make a friendly amendment to that effect?
Okay,
I hope you caught that. I was
a friendly
scrolling.
amendment to correct the 15% in the background paragraph to 18%. And also, can I make a friendly amendment for the 8-foot fence?
Okay, and are you comfortable with that friendly amendment?
I second the friendly amendment.
Okay, so then that resolution has been moved by Commissioner Duggan with the friendly amendments attached, seconded by Vice Chair Edmondson. Any other discussion on the tentative map? Not seeing any. Your votes, please. And that passes with 7 ayes. And I believe that concludes our business for this evening. So thank you all for coming out, and we'll adjourn to our next Planning Commission meeting, which will be in August.
Santa Rosa, out there in the middle of everything.